Nigga, live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello and welcome to episode 199 of Deer Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented to you by us, the staff at Brewhoop. It's been a while. I'm Kyle Carr. I am back from Cancun. I had an excellent time and I left right before the college spring breakers came in, so I feel like I got out at the perfect time. But no Riley this week, but the good news is we are bringing back Jack Traherne. Jack, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, Riley. Good to hear you had a good time in Cancun. That's a place that I'd love to visit at some point in my life. I would say I'm a little anxious about the upcoming road trip the Bucks are going to be on. 5 games. That's like a week and a half. I mean, it's a long time they're on the road. So, I mean, they are going to show what they're made of on this road trip for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. I always feel like the Western road trips are either everything goes well and there's always 1 or 2 games that just annoy you. And then there's also the fact that in Wisconsin, all these games are at 9 p.m. I think the Lakers one is at 9:30, so it's just late. So then it's also as much of, do I really want to stay up and watch this? And kind of wish this is where Adam Paris would thrive because he would decide to stay up, or now that Mitchell lives in California, if he was here, he could have done it. But
I can do it because it's like the perfect time for me, to be honest.
That's true. That's true. I'll just say I'm too tired, and I know some of those games, like the last thing I'm going to do is I learned my lesson from the Australian Grand Prix this past weekend, because that started at 11:30 p.m. in Wisconsin, and that by the time the race finished, it was close to 1 a.m. I was like, this was a bad idea. But we're not here to talk about Formula One, although that was a great race. We are here to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, who in the previous week, it was kind of a mixed bag of a week. So they were unfortunately losing in the final seconds to the Indiana Pacers last Tuesday by a score of 115 to 114. Tyrese Halliburton got the 4-point play, which pretty much crushed Milwaukee's. We'll talk about that later. Then the Bucks were able to take on a LeBron-less Los Angeles Lakers team. Luka Doncic was just a one-man team, but the Bucks won 126-106, which was flattering the Lakers. Then the Bucks got their chance to get revenge on the Pacers, beating them 126-119 on Saturday, before yesterday facing the Oklahoma City Thunder, where Milwaukee lost 121-105. So 2-2 week. Could have been 3-1 if things had gone slightly different, but I think overall, I'll kind of start with the biggest thing I learned this week, and that was I'm really interested in seeing what Milwaukee's big rotation is going to be when it gets to the playoffs, because Brook Lopez has played amazing. I mentioned it on the preview against the Oklahoma City Thunder, where I think post All-Star break, Brook is averaging like 16, 6, and almost 2 blocks a game. And that's still him on the offensive side. There's been stretches where Brook has pretty much been able to get 10, 12 points in the quarter just by himself. Unfortunately, it seems as though it kind of always tails off near the end, which, whether that's the offense, as you and Riley talked about last week, whether that's just teams adjusting, I'm not sure, but Brook has been great. Jericho Sims had a very strong game against the Pacers where he just racked up 10 rebounds. And obviously, when it comes to the playoffs, Giannis will likely play at the 5 for a good stretch of it. And I think the biggest question for me is just, how does Doc handle that? And especially with Bobby Portis returning, because I feel as though this might be a Doc just goes with Brook and Giannis only and just leaves out Jericho Sims and leaves out Bobby. And I think the biggest reason for it is the Bucks defensively have been so much better without Bobby really contributing to it. And I'm not trying to say like Bobby's not a good defender, and it's more of a system issue at times with him and the lineups that he's out with. But when I was looking at the stats since the All-Star break, the defensive ratings, Jericho Sims has the lowest with a 107.3. Giannis has a 107.8, and Brook Lopez has 109.7 defensive rating post All-Star break. For reference, Bobby had 111 defensive rating. And then if you go just off of net rating, Sims has a 0, which, I mean, he's not really there to be an offensive force like the other three, but Brook has a 7.9 net rating. Giannis is a 9.9. Bobby only has a 2.6. So I don't know, what do you do? And I feel like it's going to be very matchup dependent, because for all of Bobby's qualities on the offensive side and frustrations, like Bobby's offense can win you a game or two in a series, but Bobby's shot selection and offense could lose you a game or two in a series. And that's not including his defense, which will lose you a game or two in a series. Brook, like I said, playing the best. You're going to have Giannis. I don't think Doc is going to play Jericho Sims unless he absolutely has to, just because what Jericho Sims really brings is a lot of hustle. And he does not have the greatest offensive skill set, but that man will roll to the rim very, very hard. And, sometimes that's all you need. So I don't know what you thought about that, Jack. Well, I feel like the big rotation, is there anyone I'm missing, or is there anywhere where it's kind of like, maybe, is Doc going to listen to me, or is Doc going to do his own thing?
Yeah, I honestly, Kyle, I think Doc is going to probably do the latter, do his own thing. I think there's going to be Giannis and Brook are going to start, and then it's going to be like, I think like me and Kyle talked about last week. I think it's going to be a big rotation of the usual three, kind of like Brook, Giannis, and Bobby. And I actually agree with you. I think there's going to be series where it's going to be like, I mean, depending on how many series they play, but like against Indiana, I mean, Bobby last year in the playoffs was he was probably bad in like really bad and like hurtful in like three of those games. And, I think it was game 5. He probably won them that game. But how much do you put into that game, since they didn't have Giannis and Dame for like so much of that series and they needed his offense? The hope, I think, is that he gets creative with the rotations. I think someone on Twitter posted that he'd played Giannis at the 5 with Kuzma at the 4, like a total of 14 minutes. 4 minutes? It was, I don't know, it was some small number or something. But I guess this is the downside. Like, if you were to say, like, I'm not one of those people that's like, Doc is the worst coach ever or whatever, but he's probably not known for his imaginative lineups and stuff. Like, he's probably a bit like, oh, these are the guys we're going to play no matter who. And I do think there, to your point, there could be some creativity needed because they're like, I've watched games, like, for example, Bobby against like the Magic, I want to say this year, is like, that's like not a great matchup for him, because his shooting is a bit negated by their athleticism, their ability to, like, they're also big and fast and rangy. And then he can't use his post up skills either, because they're bigger than him. So like, in those sort of matchups, I do think it's tough to get certain guys on the court. At the same time, yeah, I think one thing that I noted last night against OKC was, man, like, like how Carl Anthony Towns, for example, like if you pitch it to him on a pick and pop, he can get it off within 1 second. The thing with Brook that I noticed is, like, he would kind of set a half screen, not a great screen, but like an okay screen on Dame, and then Dame would pitch it back, and Brook couldn't get the shot off quick enough. And then obviously he's not going to beat Hardenstein off the dribble or anything. So I do think like each big has their own drawbacks, but ultimately I do agree with you. It might take a creative approach in the playoffs, and is Doc the man for that? Not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say Doc's the worst coach. I'm just not fully sold on him. But I think a lot of that, it's weird because I remember the game right before New Year's against the Pacers, where Doc ran a 2-3 zone with Giannis and Bobby as his only bigs. And that 2-3 zone somehow gave Indiana a lot of problems offensively. And it was it felt one of those where Doc just threw something against the wall and it worked. It didn't make sense. I remember Van and I were very confused on the playback. And we were just saying, like, how is this working? This doesn't make sense. Granted, I think Indiana would figure it out. And especially with like a Pascal Siakam, really, if they had gone more in the high post, I think Pascal Siakam easily would have exploited that. Miles Turner would exploit it. So it seems as though Doc could find something like that where maybe it is focusing more on having Bobby. It takes out the man-to-man responsibility, and Bobby just has to worry about this particular area. So that could work in that sense. But yeah, you're right. Against the Magic, it's not going to work because they have both the Wagner brothers and Banchero who can pretty much take Bobby out of the game. I think Detroit, Bobby could be useful in that way, just because Detroit doesn't have the bigs that can really, Bobby can take advantage of some of those bigs. You know, there's some of them that he can stretch the floor against, and then there's, other than Isaiah Stewart, he can pretty much overpower his strength on the post side of things. So I think he could be useful against Detroit. Indiana, I don't love that idea unless you're trying to, I just don't love it. I'd rather have Kyle Kuzma be a 4 next to Giannis at the 5, just so you have some, like Giannis could be on Miles Turner and then Kuzma could be on Siakam. So I think that's like the way to approach it. But I just don't know. And are we going to really see much? Because I'm sure Doc is going to throw Giannis at the 5 for a stretch. But I also think with Brook Lopez in that OKC game, he does have such a slow jump shot. Like, it's like he has to set his feet. It just looks slow. It works, but against a more athletic team like Orlando, Bobby has a little bit, it's not as fast. It's not fast, but it's definitely quicker than Brooks. I don't know. But that's where I keep going back to. It's like, I don't know. Doc's probably going to find a way to get Bobby in it, but it comes back to, should he?
Yeah. The point about Miles Turner, like, is a really good one. Like, in a theoretical playoff series with them, they've been guarding him with Brook, and it's like giving me the heebie-jeebies. Like in the most recent game, it felt like, was it the most recent game? Yeah, sorry, they played them. Yeah, sorry. But
I know, it's like
from
they
the
just
two
played
games,
it twice in a week.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like,
they
wait, which
played
game were
both.
we
Yeah,
talking?
yeah, yeah. He went, I believe, like 1 for 8 from 3 in the first game and 2 for 10 from 3 in the second game. And I know in the first game he got a whole lot of wide open looks, and their strategy was kind of chase over the screen, kind of contain the ball handler, and then they're gonna pitch it back, and the guy on the weak side has to like pinch over a little bit, and then Brook just has to run for dear life back out to the shooter. And I do think, like, in a playoff series, they have to seriously consider guarding him with Giannis, like, at all times, basically. Maybe not at all times, but yeah, the amount of good looks that, not just that action, but like a lot of actions, it felt like they were giving up a fair few good looks just from other shooters as well in those games. But I do think, like, um, Giannis is like the ultimate trump card, both on offense and on defense against a lot of teams, and not using his mobility to like guard these pick and pop guys is, I think, a certainly like a bit of a missed opportunity. It could be.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like with Miles Turner, you kind of want him to shoot because out of all the Pacers, he's the least likely to hurt you with like Tyrese can hit threes. He's more inconsistent. But Nemhard, I wouldn't want, TJ McConnell doesn't shoot threes, but he has that ability to just take someone off the dribble, which can cause Milwaukee's defense to completely collapse. Pascal Siakam can, but I feel like Miles Turner, you'd rather have him shoot those threes. But the problem is then you're pulling Brook out. And then that's where then Milwaukee's lack of rebounding can really hurt them at times, where that could be something that Bobby could help out with, is the rebounding side of things, because we know Bobby can be a really good rebounder. It's just sometimes, I don't know whether it's miscommunication or
just
whatever.
Grab him with 2 hands, Kyle.
Yeah. It's the whole grab with 2 hands.
As Riley's been saying for forever.
Yeah, so I think there is that aspect of it. So I think that's where Bobby can be useful, is if Brook is going to constantly be dragged out, then Bobby and Giannis are really going to have to focus on that rebounding side of it. But I also think if you're going to have Bobby on the court, it can't be with Dame. Like Bobby and Dame cannot be on the court if Giannis and Brook aren't there. Like you can do a super big lineup with Giannis, Dame, Bobby, Brook, and then probably Taurean Prince or Gary Trent Jr. That could maybe work, but if it's just Bobby, Dame, and some of the other guys on the bench, it's like, oh, that's a disaster. That's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. Well, this is the whole conversation that like kind of the Bucks fans have been having ever since they traded for Dame, and you guys actually, I'm not sure, but the one of the pods with like I believe Riley made the choice. It might have been Adam made the comment that like, okay, like we've got this sample size without Bobby on the court, and like at least for those first like 7 games or whatever, it was pretty fine. Like it didn't feel like they missed Bobby much at all, and like it kind of made sense in the way of like if Dame is on the court, you don't need like all these other offensive options, and the versatility that Sims brought was actually quite like I watched it and I'm like, yeah, the puzzle pieces kind of fit together in this lineup. And that's kind of the whole like thing that Bucks fans have been saying is like Bobby and Dame. I mean, Dame's gonna play a lot of the game. I mean, he is who he is. He's an NBA superstar, and so is Bobby the best fit on this team? You know, like, and it'd be interesting to know like if because it sounded like the whole suspension thing and that when he took that wrong pill or whatever was way like was like before the All-Star break and stuff.
Yeah.
But
and then they were trying to appeal it and see if they could appeal it.
It would have been really interesting to know like if that completely like neutered his trade value. And like if he was going to be traded, but then they were like, well, we're not going to get him for the rest of this season. The other team who would have traded for him. So it's really interesting in that way. And like who feels like Sims, like the Sims representatives would have maybe known that and be like, okay, you're going to play here because this guy's about to get suspended. So because New York ultimately did him a solid, like they didn't really need DeLon Wright, but they just it sounded like they just wanted to send him to a place where he was gonna play. And so yeah, there's a whole bunch of like questions that I have about the whole Bobby situation and stuff. But yeah, ultimately like the Dame and Bobby pairing is just tough, man. It is tough.
Yeah, it's not good. But I also have to give a shout out to Brook because Brook has been amazing post All-Star break. And I'm gonna give you 2 questions on lineups. And you cannot cheat. One of them might be in the notes. But with Brook on the court, with the starters, Giannis, Dame, Taurean Prince, Kyle Kuzma, Brook. The Bucks have what ranked lineup out of lineups that how do I phrase it? Okay. What is the defensive rating? 1, what is the defensive rating? And 2, how does it rank against other lineups that have played at least 100 minutes post All-Star break?
Defensive rating. I'm going to go 109.
You're close.
And where does it rank in terms of 6th?
You are close. It is a 110.1 defensive rating, and that is 4th lowest defensive rating out of all the lineups that have played 100 minutes.
So that's pretty damn good. Yeah.
Yeah, and Brook, I think, has been kind of the key of it. And I looked at other lineups that Brook has been in. He only has one that's kind of like a catastrophic mess, and that's him, Dame, Kuzma, Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green. They only played like 18 minutes. The offense is bad as 105, and the defense was 117. So that's not great. But otherwise, all the other lineups that have a good enough sample size are pretty good. So basically, Brook might have to play 35, 36 minutes. And then what you do with those 10 to 12, I don't know. So,
yeah.
All right. I'll leave it up to you because this one, when you typed it out and I read it, I was very intrigued. So what did you learn this past week?
Yeah, just really an excuse to talk about reffing, to be honest, Kyle. And I'm not, the obligatory caveat that reffing does not win you, nor does it lose you games. Blah blah blah. We know this. But what I learned this week was that this team, specifically Giannis and Dame, better learn to win off their own back because the refs sure aren't coming to save the day. And I'm specifically referring to I was watching the replay of the Indiana game at Milwaukee, and generally, there's some bad calls either way, but it doesn't stand out too much. I will say I thought that game was one of the worst referee games I'd ever watched.
Since
just
Thursday's game against the Lakers.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. And so I'm watching the replay and I'm just like, man, that was a questionable call, and I'm watching the Pacers broadcast, and even they are like, we might have got away with one there. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm on the pod with Kyle on Monday, Tuesday for me, and I'm just going to collate some of the worst calls or some of the questionable calls. I believe I have 8 calls here, and I'm going to try and do them all in maybe 30 seconds to a minute, one each, and you can interject whenever you want. And I did them in chronological order, I hope. But okay, are we ready? Ready to go?
No, I am ready.
Okay.
I feel like there's one or two that you're going to mention. I'm like, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to get to the big one. We are going to get to the big one because, good Lord. Okay. First play of the game, I was worried from I look back on it, like the first play of the game was a bad sign. Dame comes off the screen. He does the thing where he stops and jumps up, and he gets pretty clearly clipped on the hip by Andrew Nemhard as he's coming off the screen, and just no call for the next 1 to 2 seconds as the ball's in the air. And then the guy on the baseline, not the ref standing probably 2 meters from Dame, right next to him, does not call it. This is the same ref that would mess up the block charge call on Giannis in the 4th quarter, I want to say, or maybe it was 3rd. And then the ref on the baseline had to call it. So I'm like, okay. And I remember on the playback, I was like, okay, that was really weird that the ref standing right next to Dame didn't call that, but okay, we move. The 2nd quarter, there was a Kuz shoots a floater. That ball was pretty damn close to the rim, probably just above the charge circle, and it certainly seemed like it was on the way down. I was watching the Pacers broadcast, and they said that was probably on the way down. Just no call on the goaltend. This one really annoyed me. In the 3rd quarter, Halliburton, he gets us Dame throws a bad pass and it's a turnover, and Halliburton gets the steal. He goes up for the layup. He gets clipped by Dame's shoulder on the way up. Foul call. And I said in the time, I said, that's a foul. And I was like, yeah, that's fair enough. Literally a few plays later, Giannis dribbles left, spins over his left shoulder or whatever, spins right, lays it up. Siakam 2-hand shoves him in the side as he shoots the layup. No call.
Yep. That was one of those. I was like, how in the world
I'm like,
did we just not let it? That one just went. And I was like, that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And it's just he blatantly put both hands in his hip and shoved him forward. And it was because Giannis's momentum was already going that way. It didn't seem as bad as it was, but blatantly just missed call. I don't know how you missed that call anyway.
Especially because earlier they had given a flagrant one for something relatively similar. Early with and I was like, I don't. It was just the inconsistency. I was like, I don't understand.
Yes. Where are we at?
So we got to the
yes.
Third
we're at the big one. So Giannis is driving. He's on the left side of the court. He drives. He spins right. Now he is basically at the edge of the key as he begins his spin move, and Nesmith is on the opposite side of the charge circle. And Nesmith rotates over in the space of it would have had to been 0.5 seconds. Now, hats off to Nesmith. He did an excellent job of trying He did as good a job as you can do trying to get to the spot in time. Now, I don't know what the rules are. He has he's like inside the charge circle, but his heels are up. So I have no clue what that means. But he is effectively like his momentum is going so fast forward that he's effective. Kyle, you're a movie guy. I'm not really a movie guy, but The Matrix, where
Yep.
the guy's avoiding the bullets and he's like doing like the limbo, like he's doing like a backbend. That was what Neesmith looks like, and so Giannis like dunks it on him, and I'm like, that is a clear block. Like, there's no way he was set in time.
Yeah.
And the same ref that that didn't call that 3-point foul on Dame at the start of the game missed that one, calls it a charge. I was floored. I'm just like, a charge? What are you looking at?
It was such an annoying moment because and that was the thing. He wasn't set. Like, he wasn't set, and that somehow turns into like that. If he was set, I would at least understand it a little bit more. But he got there, but he didn't. He wasn't set. There was no reason to call that an offensive foul. It's a no call or it's blocked and foul.
Yeah, that was what was. I'm just like, if you were going to guess, essentially, and you were going to give it 50-50 and guess one way, there is no way you are giving the 50-50 to the defensive player in that situation.
Yeah.
And I thought Frank Madden made a good point about this on Twitter. He said that there's lots of ways to. I'm not calling the ref an idiot, but there's lots of ways to idiot-proof charge calling. But one of the biggest problems is it feels like refs like to do the demonstrative charge action, like they love calling it. And it feels like, especially on Giannis, they love to call it on Giannis. And so I was just like, if that's a 50-50 call and you're seriously going to watch a guy rotate from one side of the charge circle to the other in 0.5 seconds, somehow get set and stop his momentum in half a second, like, hats off to you if you're going to just like, no notes. Excellent work there.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. There was a play in the fourth quarter where Giannis gets the ball in the middle of the zone. It was when he's checked back in the fourth quarter, and the pace is probably like an 8-0 run at this point, maybe like an 8-2 run. It's probably like 9 points at 9-point lead at this point, and Giannis gets the ball in the middle of the zone. He basically they rotate the wrong way, and he drives to the rim, and it looks like Neesmith like knees him in the backside. Like he shoves his knee into like Giannis's butt or whatever, and Giannis loses balance because he got kneed in the butt and travels, and so they call a foul on it, and Indiana challenged the call and say that he traveled, and we were on there was me, Van, and Morgan on the replay, and we're like, okay, so this is a pretty easy call, right? Because he clearly gets like pushed in the back, and that's why he traveled. So the push came first, so there should. And so I don't know. I'm not like, they reviewed it, and Tyler Ford's explanation was that, what was the explanation? It was there was no foot-to-foot contact, and we were all like, who cares about feet? He got kneed in the butt. Like, what does feet have to do with it? So I have no clue what happened there. Moving on. This one really annoyed me. Giannis has 4 fouls at this point. Halliburton drives to the basket, and Giannis rotates as the help defender, but he more or less just stands straight up. He doesn't move. He doesn't move into Halliburton's path or anything. Halliburton then like jumps diagonally away from the basket into Giannis and throws up some crappy left-hand layup that misses, and they call a foul on Giannis. Do you remember this play?
Yep, and that was the one where I was like, if we're going, I don't understand. It goes back to the Neesmith one where Giannis gets the charge, and it's like, you just called a charge for a guy that was set and got bowled over, and Giannis is set and goes and has his hands straight up. And that was a foul. I was like, this is the inconsistency that doesn't make sense and what annoys people.
Yep. And so Giannis basically is just standing there, and Halliburton just like rockets himself into him because he's scared of getting blocked. He knows that Giannis's length will block him, so he goes like right into Giannis, and effectively Giannis did nothing but just kind of stand there.
Mm-hmm.
That got him his 5th foul. And then this is the one that like really annoyed me. Giannis got his 6th foul.
The 6th one, yeah.
So Nembhard, like they obviously know, they've been told by the coaching staff that Giannis has 5 fouls. So Nembhard catches it on the wing, rips left, and essentially uses his right arm, extends into Giannis's chest, cocks his head back like he's been like shot or something, and like I don't know if he shot it or passed it.
It was,
but essentially
like
it was like yeah.
It was like a flail because he like eventually passed it, but it felt like he was trying to shoot.
Yeah,
and then he tried shooting
because he probably didn't think he would get the call, and he thought it would be a turnover if he shot, so he tried to pass it because he was clearly not trying to play basketball in that moment. He was trying to get a 6th foul on Giannis. He had no other plan other than to get a 6th foul on Giannis, and he like extends his own right arm into Giannis and then like throws his head back, and they called the foul on Giannis, and I'm like, what did actually Giannis do wrong? It's not like Giannis moved into his cylinder or didn't do anything. I watched the replay. I'm like, what did Giannis do wrong in this scenario? Like, what is he supposed to do?
This is one of those where I wish Milwaukee had a challenge.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Yeah, I'm getting to that. So he was out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got one more play. Lillard catches the ball. There's probably like 40 seconds to go at this point. I don't know, something happened. It like got tipped into the backcourt. He catches it. Basically, Nembhard and Siakam are both chasing him. The Bucks are up 6 points at this point, and I mean, there is like a lot. There's probably like 3 different fouls on this play on Lillard as he dribbles the ball into the backcourt trying to get it. And there's one guy. There's someone posted a screenshot on Twitter of essentially Siakam has both hands wrenched around Dame's right arm during this play, and that eventually there were no fouls called on this play. I don't know how, and they got the fast break layup and reduce the lead to 4 points. So those are the plays. The Bucks had no challenge on like 4 straight plays that they probably would have won if they had a challenge, but they used it on some really inconsequential play where like AJ Green tries to like save the ball, and he gets like, he steps out like I watched one replay of it, and basically his foot is like, like way out of bounds, but Neesmith then fouls him after that play. So obviously the first play is that his foot is out of bounds, and so they challenged it, and we're watching one replay, and we're like, they're gonna lose.
Yeah. That's where it was kind of like why out of all the things to challenge, and in hindsight, good thing they won, but that was one of those where it's like you could have used it on any of the fouls Giannis got called on in the 4th quarter. You could have used it when Dame got fouled. Like, there is so many other times where it could have been nice to have that challenge.
Yes, especially because like that play with Giannis. Yeah, so first off, that play, I think Eric Name tweeted that like Thanasis like was sitting right there, and he like told that he's like, challenge that, and apparently I don't know if that impacted their decision, but good Lord, please do not. don't be listening to any spectator, like, and we know that Thanasis is known for his like, his energetics and stuff, but he's probably not the best like arbiter of the truth.
Right. Like, Thanasis is one of us. He is going to defend anything that happens to Milwaukee. That does not mean you should listen. This is kind of like when was like, oh yeah, we drafted Johnny Manziel because some dude told us. Like, you should be the experts. Don't listen to us.
Yes. Yeah. So especially because like the Giannis block charge, I mean, that would have been an and one, and it would have reduced a foul on Giannis had they had that challenge. But they didn't have a challenge. So I will say their challenge use this season has been, I mean, a little. It doesn't feel like they're great.
There are times I feel like it's very hit or miss, where sometimes you go, okay, you even if you didn't win the challenge, that is something you should still challenge. And then there's kind of what happened with the AJ Green one. It's like, look, I love AJ Green. Everyone that listens knows that. I don't think that was worth a challenge.
Yeah, it's like especially when there's fouls on like your best, especially like the fact that they don't have like the third like quote unquote creator with like Chris there. You need to protect Dame and Giannis at all costs because those guys are like the key to the recipe, really. So yeah, that was like that's my whole spiel. I thought the refereeing in this one, like I'm always reticent to say like the refereeing loses a team a game because it almost never does. But good lord, this one came close. I'll just say that.
The combination of questionable refereeing and Indiana ridiculous shot making,
Yes,
really, it made it very nervy. I'll say nervy is the word to go with. But I also agree with that, just because when I was listening to the broadcast when last week when the Bucks played Cleveland, and they had mentioned like how Dame was not getting any free throw attempts, and it was and it was one of those questionables. And there was times where I looked and I was like, how is Dame not getting these calls? Like, I feel like that was one of the nice things, at least the beginning part of Dame last year, was, oh, we have a guy that can get to the free throw line and they're calling it. Like, Giannis doesn't get these calls, but we have a guy that will. And sometimes Dame does too much foul baiting for my own good. But that's one of the nice things with Dame. And I saw it last night against Oklahoma City. They're very physical. And if the refs are going to call it, which they likely will in the playoffs, they're not going to, all these ticky-tack fouls are not going to get called in the playoffs. And you got to play through contact. And I think that's something they're going to have to realize. And I think an Oklahoma City game was a prime example where they were hounding Dame on the perimeter. They were all over him. They had him checked. It was, they did not get, and that's what makes Oklahoma City so good, is that defense is swarming and able to get that fine line between physical but not getting calls for fouls. And they have to adjust to that come playoff time. And especially if they're going to play the Pacers again, you're going to get the same thing. And they're going to, and Indiana feels as though we probably will be able to get away with it sometimes. And they have enough depth where it's like, okay, if someone gets 2-3 quick fouls, okay, we'll put someone else in and really throw Milwaukee's rhythm off.
Yeah, that actually segues to this is sort of on that topic, but a slight just random note I had that I wanted to share with you, Kyle. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I'm getting to believe this more and more. The Bucks need like the whole Cape. I know we were having like the KPJ chat. Like, can he play 15 minutes? Can he play 20? Can he play 25 minutes? I'm starting to get to the point. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this, but I'm starting to get to the point that they need to prioritize getting players like KPJ himself. Like, I'm thinking they should prioritize signing KPJ over a guy like Trent in the offseason. And this is getting to what you're talking about, is against these physical teams, you really need guys who can like create creases in the defense, create advantages, and like change direction and stuff. And I think these like shooter types that aren't like that, you have like dribble, shoot, pass, and like, for example, I think for Trent, for me, he is like he's just shoot. He's not really dribble or pass.
It's like dribble can be done, but you don't love it.
Yeah, exactly. And AJ Green, there is no dribbling really.
No, shoot.
Yes, yeah. You are correct. Actually, I should be clear that Trent, he can do that supplemental playmaking, but if there's like, if they're playing like OKC or Cleveland, like these guys are not dribbling against those teams. So, like I remember a couple years ago, like OKC's scouting, their whole like scouting MO was, we want guys who can dribble, pass, shoot. And even if they're not elite at one of those skills, this is like the ability to like have a slight advantage. Maybe Dame creates a slight advantage, and then you can then kind of like what's the word, like capitalize on that advantage. I'm like watching KPJ in these games against Cleveland and OKC, and I think he's going to be more valuable. Like if they get now, Indiana is kind of a funny matchup because they're not the greatest defensive team, and I think there are circumstances where Trent and Green are actually might be more useful than KPJ. But I do think against like your typical playoff opponents, throw Orlando in there, throw maybe Detroit in there. I think the ability to come hard off a pick and roll and get fouled and do stuff like that is going to be possibly more valuable than your sort of more just the more tailored skill of shooting, if you will. I don't know what you think about that take.
I don't disagree. It's hard because I'm still in the process of trying to separate KPJ, the basketball player, and KPJ, the person.
Yes.
And I will be flat out honest about that. So it does skew my perception. But a player like Kevin Porter Jr. is more needed because you can go and find another shooter. The Bucks did it last year. They found Malik Beasley. They did it this year. They got Taurean Prince and Gary Trent Jr. You have AJ Green. You can always draft someone. Like you can drafting a shooter or finding a shooter in free agency is a lot easier than drafting or finding a guy that can do the dribble, pass, and shoot. Because right now, the only two guys that have that is Dame and Kevin Porter Jr. That's really it. Giannis, I guess if we want to say shoot for Giannis in the mid-range, we can include that, but it's tougher to find that skill set at the rate that Milwaukee will need to, given their cap situation. So I don't disagree with that. And I think, like I said, Kevin Porter Jr. has played really well. And I will not deny that. It's just, again, it's hard for me to sit here and be like, yeah, let's sign him for next year when there's still that cloud of maybe he gets suspended. And there's still the aspect of he still did what he did. And I don't know if and I haven't seen, and granted, if someone wants to send it to me on Blue Sky, like, here's the work that he has done to kind of like atone for the behavior. If he's putting in the work, I'll try and soften it. It's just hard for me to like separate. But I do think someone of that skill set is more needed for Milwaukee than a guy that can shoot the ball well and kind of defend.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree on the personal like basketball player stuff. That's always that is the hang up, and I don't have any queries. Like I have some of those similar concerns, and you hope that he's doing that personal work to atone for what he did and stuff. I also the point about this team has 3 primary creators currently. Like the way I see it, they have Giannis, they have Dame, and they have Kevin Porter Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Porter Jr. like if now I am, this can segue into one of my other random notes, but I am the whole like Middleton Kuzma chat is kind of getting on my...
It's dumb.
Yeah, it's not that. Yeah, it's just like I feel like people need to have the convo after every single game. It's like, oh well, Middleton would have helped. Now, I will fully acknowledge, like on offense, I think Middleton against maybe, let's say 24 out of 30 teams is probably going to be is like almost 90% going to be more helpful than Kuzma.
Yeah.
But like there was a lot of chat yesterday about like, oh man, like Chris Middleton would have been really helpful against the Thunder team. And
no.
Yeah,
Not this version of Chris Middleton. I love Chris Middleton. I've seen him struggle with ball handling against lesser teams than Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, you're bang on. And my point, I've made this a couple points on the playbacks, is like Middleton, this current version of Middleton, and this is not to have a Chris legacy debate. We all know what he's done for Milwaukee. It's, his legacy is set in stone in the city. But this current just speaking about the basketball player, the teams that he struggled with were big, physical, like-size switchable teams, right? Mm-hmm. Like that when he struggled in games, that was the common thread that I noticed, is that because generally the area that he could still rely on was his size, right? Like he could back down smaller players and just get to that trusty fadeaway and that sort of middle hook or whatever it is. but against like OKC, these big physical teams that he's never been a speed player, and that part of his game has diminished obviously a fair bit since the injuries. He's a strength player, and like he doesn't find those advantages against these juggernaut defensive teams that he would against a fair few teams in the NBA. And then that's not to talk about his defense, which fell off quite a bit. But it's just like, yeah, the conversation is getting a bit like it's just wearing on me a little bit. And the other thing that I'll mention is, in my mind, they didn't look at it. I don't think the Bucks, and this is sort of what I hope happened, is I don't think the Bucks look at Kuzma and think, oh, he's a better offensive player than Middleton. I think they made the trade to, number one, break up money, to get better on defense, and I think they're going to trade him this offseason.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is going to happen. And obviously it's just easier to do that when you can get under the second apron and stuff like that, which that was seemingly the goal here. And it just seems like, to me, like, great, if they can make this work, awesome. But I'm not like, oh, like they made the wrong trade or something, or maybe they did, but it's just like I'm more just like, they made this trade to make a move in the off season, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, that was gonna be my point. Is I hope they didn't make the trade for Kyle Kuzma's offensive ability, because he doesn't really, for someone that tall, he's just so weird. We've talked about his weirdness around the rim and how it's just an experience, and his wacky wave inflatable 2-man-esque throwing things up is always baffling. He's not a good 3-point shooter either. Like, he's not shooting the three well, and it frustrates me every time I see him shoot a three, because it's like, I think you can get a better shot than that. Like, you're shooting 29% in the 18 games you played in Milwaukee. Stop shooting threes. Like, if it's a pick and pop and you're open, okay, that's one thing. But I would like to see him try to find something else. And that's where kind of the Milwaukee traded him for more of the defensive side. Because defensively, it's unfair to kind of paint Kuzma as this bad defender, because he's done a pretty solid job overall. And I was pleasantly surprised about that. And I know since he's come to Milwaukee, he's got 109 defensive rating, which, isn't amazing, but it's not bad either. It's better than I would have expected from him. And I mean, Chris Middleton has 107 which is weird, but I think that's more of like the Wizards playing better lately. I don't understand, but at this point, it's more of the financial flexibility it gives you, and also it's more athleticism. And there's a reason why this starting lineup, even though I do not love Taurean Prince as the 2, it's working defensively. It's still doing what it needs to on a defensive side, and Kuzma is doing a good job at rebounding as well. So that is something I do need to give him props for. I think at this point, you're kind of like, I think we're still debating like the Chris we saw even in that Indiana series last year, where yes, he was a human flamethrower. And you're right, that would be helpful against the majority of the teams, but it's not going to be helpful against Orlando. It's not going to be helpful against Cleveland. It maybe won't be helpful against the Pacers. Like, I don't know. And that's where it kind of comes down to, is Kuzma going to be better offensively? No, but can we have Kuzma there so defensively against Indiana, you could put him on one of Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam? Sure. If it's against Orlando, you can put him on one of the Wagner brothers. So I agree, and I feel like at this point, it's happened. It's what's done is done. Did I love the trade?
Yeah, that's the
No.
thing. It's like, okay, let's just move on. Like, it's happened. Like, we don't have to keep doing the whole Chris thing.
Yeah, like, it's what's done is done. Do I love it? Did I love it at the time? No. Do I love it now? I'm warming up to the idea of Kyle Kuzma, what he's done. At this point, Kyle Kuzma has done more good than bad since becoming a Buck.
Yeah,
never thought I'd
sure.
say that. So, anything else from these games, or you got any last?
Yeah, not really. I think I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about the road trip coming up in the predictions, but we have some rapid fire questions So I have a couple of them. So the first one, are you kind of like an NBA 2K? Like, do you play that game? And if so, do you do a particular build for your My Player?
No, I'm not a video game guy at all. I used to like be like, I don't know, back in like high school or whatever, we would play like 2K and stuff, but I completely gave up. My
Yeah.
brother, he had a PS5.
Okay.
He lives in Queensland right now, but like he was a video game guy, but I honestly just never got into it. Like if I'm gonna watch a screen, I don't really want to be doing any work. I'll just watch YouTube or watch the game or anything. So yeah, it sucks. I can't really contribute much to this combo
No,
just
that's
because I don't
fine.
really play. Yeah.
I know because I know Riley and Adam don't, so it's kind of hard to answer that. But I was like, I was the kind of person I would just make like a 7-foot like brick wall. Like I wanted, and all he does is post moves. I was like, I just want to do that, just bangs into people in the pose and then does a dunk. I wanted a Shaq like player, basically. Because I was like point guard, or I'll do a point guard, but then that kind of felt like cheating at points. Because
Yeah.
if you make him a good enough shooter, that's like, all right, this isn't fun anymore. But give me a center, 250 pounds, 7'1" dude. That's great. So you have a long day. Do you have like a go-to like decompress? Like it's been a day, whether it's school, whether it's work, like you had a day. What is your go-to? Like, I'm gonna just take a moment to decompress.
I usually just lie down and listen to a podcast.
Okay. Any
And
particular
generally
podcast?
it's generally I've got a couple. There's a couple like what's the one? I've been listening to this podcast called the Tony. I think it's called the Tony and Ryan podcast.
I'm gonna Google it right now.
Yeah, but generally, like as a blanket rule, no basketball involved or none of that. It's just like like Aussie people just telling jokes and doing stupid
Okay,
shit.
I've seen clips of this one. Like, I'll see it on like TikTok or Instagram. Like, I'll see
Yeah,
clips from it. Okay.
literally discovered it last week, and I've been binge listening. Like, just the funniest podcast, and they seem to do like at least 3 a week or something. So like, yeah, good production value. And the other one is, I don't know if you've heard of this, but have you heard of Hamish and Andy, Kyle?
Yes, I've heard of it. Didn't listen to it, but I've heard
Yes.
of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like iconic kind of media personalities in Australia. They've been doing a podcast for years, and there's a whole bunch of like inside jokes that like people who listen to the podcast for years understand. Like, for example, they take like 4 months off every year, and they say it's a government mandated podcasting break, and that they're going to fight the Aussie government tooth and nail to end the break, and the break never gets shortened. But yeah, so there's all these like inside funny jokes, but yeah, like podcast, just like anything that's just like funny, just listen to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say
What
for
about
me,
you?
I would say video games are one of the options. So lately I've been playing Sid Meier's Civilization 7. And I don't know, there's something about being and it pisses my girlfriend off so much because she was like, "What do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I just did one where I was like Himiko, like Queen of Wa, who was Queen of Japan." And then I'm like, "Yeah, I'm kind of in a war with Harriet Tubman." She's like, "What do you mean you're in a war with Harriet Tubman?" I was like, "I'm in a war with Harriet Tubman. I don't know why." And then I got Charlemagne also wanted to start a war with me. She's like, I don't understand this concept. Why are you? This does not historically make sense. Like, it makes complete sense. So I feel like that's one. And then I also listen to podcasts. I think the two main ones I do are Science Versus. So that one I really enjoy. And then Gastropod is the other. And Gastropod, it talks about like the science or the history of like certain foods. So like I just listened to an episode about the history of like non-alcoholic beers and wines, and they even like tasted it. And like there's an episode on quinoa. One of my favorite episodes is when they talk about the different types of mints, like spearmint and peppermint. So those are probably the two main podcasts.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
And then the third and final question I have is, if you had to sit, speaking of Thanasis, if you had to sit next to former Buck and watch, like you're in like kind of in the room and you're doing a playback, is there a particular former Buck you would want on that playback?
As you were saying this, I just was like,
I have a good one.
who would be really, you could go two ways about it. You get like the strategic person, or you could get like the funny person, like Brooke Lopez would be hilarious. I'll go Carl Corver, man.
Ooh.
Just from he only played, was it one season with the Bucks
Yep.
or yeah. But I don't know. I feel like his strategy as a shooter and like what he kind of thinks of how a set should be run or something would be really interesting.
That's a good one. I went with John Henson because I think he would be a fool. I feel like post NBA John Henson is just showing up and he's just doing it for vibes. I think it would be interesting if he had any old stories of like a young Giannis. I think that would be a fun one as well.
Yeah. He sounds like a funny dude. So
Yeah.
so he'd be hilarious.
So yeah, that's what I have for rapid fire. Now we got Tales from Basketball's Outback. I know when Riley talked to you last week, unfortunately the season ended for the 36ers, but we've had the finals now between Illawarra Hawks and Melbourne United. So Jack, have you watched any of the finals? And if so, what have been your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I watched each game. Yeah, I watched each game in full. And it's really funny, like Melbourne, like Illawarra are like the quote unquote like far more like they have far more firepower, but they've never been there before. So their first finals appearance since I want to say 2010. Not maybe not like finals in terms of like the teams that like the championship series. They were in, I believe, in 2010. So uh, they haven't been there before, and like Melbourne are like the just class. They've been there a lot, and like Delhi's experience, like obviously former Buck,
Yes,
Matthew
former Buck
Dellavedova.
Matthew
Yeah,
Dellavedova.
he's just a funny player, man. Like you don't know how he gets any of his shots off, and he's got a really ugly jump shot, and none of it is pretty with Delhi. Like, and as you know, Kyle, like it probably wasn't like the game is not like smooth with Delhi. It's the complete opposite of that. They really only have like one true source of like. Actually, they have two sources of offense. They have Chris Goulding, who's like this. He's probably the greatest shooter in Australian history, and he just comes off screens, bombs it. He's probably like mid-30s now, but he just has never lost the ability to shoot. And then they have Ian Clark, who I don't know if you remember Ian Clark. He played in the NBA for the Warriors and Pelicans.
I'm gonna have to
He's
look.
is he like a bench? He's like a bench player on the KD championship teams.
Okay.
But yeah, he's kind of like I want to say he's like 37 or something. Maybe like maybe that's a little
He
bit
was
old.
34 apparently.
Yeah,
34
yeah.
years old.
But they just have a bunch of like sort of grizzled veterans, and they have led for, I believe, like the Hawks have led for 80 minutes of the series or something, and the Melbourne have led for maybe, I think the stat was like 30 minutes, and they just keep coming out like at the end of games and just kind of pulling them out. And so the Melbourne United are up 2-1 against the Hawks right now. Going home, they can win the series at home on tomorrow night, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, it was funny because looking, it was like Illawarra won the regular season series between these two teams, but as you mentioned, that does not matter come playoff time. So, do you think Melbourne's going to close it out tomorrow / today by the time it gets uploaded?
Yeah. It's really tough to count Illawarra out because if Melbourne has a bad, Melbourne feels like just scraping by with enough offense, and if they feels like they're hitting some tough shots as well. So if they go cold, it could be like an Illawarra 20-point win in one of these. But I'm going to say going home, I mean, if Melbourne don't get it done in game 4, could be the momentum could really swing to Illawarra. So I'm going to say they get it done in game 4 and they win another championship.
All
Which
right.
I wish my team was as competent as Melbourne United. I tell you that much. They are the most competent team in the NBL, and they have always been the most competent team. It's
You know, that's all you
enraging,
need
man.
sometimes. It's just general. You don't need a superstar. You just need competence.
Yes.
But I
Yeah.
guess that makes sense when they've had the second most titles in NBL history. So
It's just like they have a system. They kind of it's almost very NBA like. Like Delhi and Shea Illy. The other thing is Shea Illy's like the other defensive hound that Melbourne United have, and he was out for Game 3 with like concussion like symptoms, and he might be coming back. And he's a huge part of their defense, and like Melbourne just has this system. It is defense first. They're like consistently the best defensive team, and defense wins championships, as they say. So
there we go. I'm sure next time we'll have you on. We'll double check. We'll see how everything went. But we're still going to hope for Illawarra to pull the scrappy underdog victory and win Game 5 at home. But we're going to end it with the weekly predictions. So this upcoming week, Milwaukee have 3 games, I'm sure, by the time we record. So as we mentioned earlier, they're going out west. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's bad. But Tuesday or today, depending on when you're hearing this, it will be against the Golden State Warriors. Then on Thursday, they will face the Lakers. LeBron might be back by then. Still, that one's probably going to be 50-50. And then they go to the Sacramento Kings on Saturday. So, Jack, what do you think out of these 3 games? How will the Bucks do?
Oh man, I think they're going to get the Lakers game. Judging by what I've heard, I don't think LeBron's going to be back. I don't know if you've heard some update on that, but it sounded like he was out at least 2 weeks. It sounded like so.
It felt like one of those, like he's close, but maybe, but they might not risk it. Kind of thing.
Yeah, so let's hope LeBron misses that one. So let's lock in the Lakers. The Kings, I'm not sure if he's been out with a hamstring. So I'm not sure about him, but regardless, I think they should beat the Lakers and the Kings. Like, I think they could beat the Kings with Sabonis, but it'd be great if he doesn't play. That Warriors game is the one I'm looking at. I will say I've been following the scores recently, and the Warriors have been scoring like 100 and like low hundreds point totals each game. They keep like pulling out wins. I'm going to assume their defense has improved, but screw it. 3-0. 3-0 for me.
All right. And looks like LeBron is still going to be out probably another week. So
right, yeah.
This was reported by Shams. So probably no LeBron on Thursday, which is, I'm going to say 2-1. I think
it's probably the sensible.
I mean, I want to go 3-0, but I just feel like it seems Golden State has started to figure out this Steph and Jimmy thing. And I think just that first game going all the way out west, I just have there's something in me that's like, I should go against my better judgment. So I'll say 2-1. I do think they beat the Lakers. I do think they beat the Kings with or without Sabonis. So I would say a 2-1 week would not be bad for going out west, because then it only gets harder.
Yeah.
It's only going to get tougher from there. So we will take it. But that will be it for us. Make sure to check us out at brewhoop.com, where we will have game previews and game threads, reviews. We'll have the Tuesday tracker, and you can join us on the playback. And for those of you that are going to try and impersonate us, don't. It's not going to work. Do not try and impersonate us. That's all I got to say. So we'll make sure to come back next week. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, follow us on YouTube, and we will talk to you again later.